Hi, welcome to Relish Books. Today I'm doing a review of The Blue Castle by Ellen Montgomery. I don't have like a fancy title cover for it because I read it on Kindle, but this was the final Ellen Montgomery book for me, her final novel that I had not yet read, and I really enjoyed it. And I not only enjoyed it, but I really found that there were some unique qualities to it, things in her writing that aren't usually there, along with all of her well-known little gimmicks that she always uses. But I really liked the plot. It's a basic plot, but really fun. So it follows Valency Sterling, this woman who is almost 30 years old, who has never really had any life experiences. She lives a miserable existence with her what are even the words for her family? Ellen Montgomery loves to write characters like this. These very like old, respectable families full of a lot of false pride, kind of I don't know, dead religion, so to speak. They're very prim and proper and really bad people, essentially. And they've given her nothing. Her existence has been miserable, without love, without usefulness. And then she finds at the beginning of the book that she only has a year to live. And this is where I really like the plot of this, because other people have definitely written about this idea, but I think it's a really great one, especially in this setting. Kind of this idea of what would a person who has had no real life or existence, what would they do with 1 year in which to try to live to the fullest that they can. And I really enjoyed Valency's journey. It felt real to me without being, well, there are definitely some elements of it that didn't feel real. I'll talk about those more later. But as far as her response, it felt pretty real. Her first acts are kind of acts of rebellion against her family, because she's not afraid of them anymore. She's not afraid of the conventions of them. She's not afraid of how they'll react, because she realizes, none of it really matters. She was so afraid of having to live out the rest of her life, and she realizes that's not going to happen anymore, so it doesn't really matter what she does. And not that she takes this view of nothing matters. That's not the way she really reacts at all. I really liked how, while she definitely has acts of rebellion and in the eyes of her family kind of goes off the deep end, she doesn't go completely off the deep end. She doesn't lose her own sense of what's right and of morality. She holds true to those things that she had always believed. She just rejects following the traditions of her family that she didn't ever believe in. So it's not like she throws off her beliefs. She just actually starts living the way that she would have always liked to. She doesn't just go and do all kinds of terrible things. Her family might think so, but she really is actually trying to live more rightly. Sometimes we would see some people might react to where, kind of like Groundhog Day, where they just do whatever. But that's not really what she does. And I think it's neat how what she wants, first of all, kind of the first thing that she wants, after she's kind of committed these kind of minor acts of rebellion against her family, what she's really craving is to be useful. One of the things that's bothering her the most is that in her life, she has never been useful to anybody, and nobody will miss her when she's gone, because none of her family actually cares about her at all. And so her first big change that she makes is to find someone to help, to find someone to be useful to. And I really like that idea. It really addresses that need that people feel to be useful. And then her second need is for love. And, she has this exciting, dreamlike romance that's very, very fun to read about, but maybe doesn't strike wholly realistic. This is kind of the part where things kind of take on a dreamlike quality. But it's not too out there for it to work for me. I think some of the plot lines are... I think she had some ideas that maybe didn't all fit together. The whole plot line with the writer that Valancy's obsessed with, John Foster, it didn't really fit super well into the story. And the plot twist with him, it's not even a plot twist because I think the reader's supposed to see it coming from the very beginning of the book. I won't say what it is just because, but I think anybody who's read it definitely knows from the start where that's going. But I didn't feel like that fit into the story very well. It was kind of this thing apart from the story that was never fully developed, and it's just kind of there, and it's in the story and it works for the story in a sense, but it doesn't work well with the other things, I thought. The thing that I did like about it was you're like, okay, this thing that's supposed to be a plot twist that we all know about, we all know what's going to happen with this. I actually think that Ellen Montgomery was using that possibly as a cover for the plot twist that's coming that you definitely can't predict. You can't see that one coming. And I think she kind of uses the other thing, like you're expecting this one big plot twist, and then you get this other one that you never saw coming. So I did like it as far as that went, but other than that, the whole John Foster thing was not... I think it would have been better worked into a different story. It didn't really work too well in this one. But some of the things that I felt were really unique about this book, as opposed to Ellen Montgomery's other work, some things that I've complained about when I've talked about Ellen Montgomery's work before, one of the huge things is that a large portion of this book, and this could be a spoiler, I guess, not super huge one, because like half of the book or more deals with this, but if you don't want to know anything about what happens, you might want to stop the video now. But a large portion of the book takes place after Valancy's marriage, and that's something that Ellen Montgomery for the most part avoided doing, because she really in general was not good at writing about marriage, and she was not good at writing heroes. Her heroes are always the weakest part of her stories, or usually the weakest part of her stories. But this one was unique in that because it was kind of the focus of the book largely, she explored it more than she had really done in any of her books. You know, I think of like the Anne books, I feel like I've complained about this before, where Anne and Gilbert are kind of okay until they get married, and then it's like Ellen Montgomery just does not know how to write their relationship once they're married. It's like, okay, now they're together, what do we do? Gilbert was always pretty quiet. He never had a lot to say. But after their marriage, he just becomes a completely dead character. But in this book, again, I think because this was her focus from the beginning, and it wasn't just like, her focus wasn't just getting them together and then that being it, and then being like, okay, now that I go on, I don't know what to do. But the marriage itself is kind of the dream of the book, and that's really what she's focusing on. And so it works so much better. There are still elements to it that are very unrealistic, but I forgive them because she's actually writing about it. Their marriage is idealistic, but it is a special circumstance, and it's fun, it's beautiful, it's just really, really enjoyable to read about. So realistic or not, I love that. She's actually writing about it. She doesn't just drop the story when they're going to get married, and she doesn't just, the husband doesn't just become some shadowy, insignificant being once they're actually married. And the biggest thing, the hero actually speaks. Ellen Montgomery was notoriously bad at having the hero, the romantic hero of her stories, have more than a couple lines of dialogue per book. This is especially bad in the Emily books, where Teddy almost never speaks. He's just not around for most of the books, and when he is, you kind of see him always distantly. He's never right there. He's never actually talking. You might know he says stuff, but he's almost never actually in quotations. The hero in The Blue Castle actually talks. And a lot of times, if he's talking like anything serious, his dialogue is fine if he's being kind of unserious. Anytime he's talking seriously, he definitely talks like a very sentimental female writer wrote his dialogue, for sure. But at least he's talking. And he's a pretty sweet character. So, yes, some of his passages are very cringy and sappy, but at least he's not a dead, silent thing. He actually talks. He's a character that's there. He's important. He is good. And I really, really like that. That's something that Ellen Montgomery very, very rarely did. And so, yeah, I love that element of it, even though, yes, she definitely gave in to her weaknesses of romantic idealism. And yet, it's better to have him be like that than to just be non-existent. So I love that. Yeah, I liked it. The end was definitely a bit over the top for me. I was like, okay, all this is a little too much. It kind of ties into the whole John Foster plot line where she was just kind of adding a couple extra layers that I don't think she would have needed to. But overall, it's a very sweet, fun book. I think it's fun to discuss because I think there could be a lot of discussion points about like, what would you do in Valancy's position? And did she go too far in rebelling against her family and throwing them off and kind of not caring about their feelings? I think you could argue that maybe she goes a little too far, but I don't think the author is necessarily saying that she's right about absolutely everything. I think most people in Valancy's position would do some things that were going a bit too far. And like I said, she doesn't totally go off the deep end like I think a lot of people would. And she doesn't just completely put her whole family out of her life and be like, I never want to have anything to do with you ever again. Her approach to them, especially towards the end, is even somewhat compassionate. Even though, again, Ellen Montgomery loved to write these very over-the-top, awful family members. It's something that's a common theme with her books, I think because she actually, unfortunately, grew up with some family members kind of similar to these people. But her family members are so terrible that you feel like she's kind of justified. Not that she should have, not that like, I don't know, not that rebellion is necessarily justified, but I don't think it's really rebellion to do what she did. Some of her acts and some of the things that she says were maybe unnecessary, but again, I feel like they are realistic, and her family is not family to her, so to speak. She doesn't really owe them anything, and she's very aware that she's not actually hurting them with what she's doing as far as she's concerned, because she knows that they don't actually care anything about her. The only thing that bothers them and everything that she's doing is how it will reflect back on them, like in the eyes of the community. They don't actually care at all about her, and if they did, she would have acted differently and with more thought to their feelings if she was actually going to hurt their feelings. So I don't know, I think that could be fun to discuss. I don't think she actually really does anything that bad or that out there. It just seemed so to them. But anyway, those are some of my thoughts on The Blue Castle by Ellen Montgomery. And now that I've read all of her books, Possibly my next video, I'm going to do all of Ellen Montgomery's novels ranked. So you can be looking out for that. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye.